The Alpha watched her kiss him. His jealousy almost destroyed the entire kingdom. The kingdom of Lithoria was vast, filled with dark forests, snow-capped mountains, and rivers that shimmered silver under the moonlight. The people lived under the watchful eye of the Alpha King, Darien, a man as powerful as he was feared. He ruled not only with strength, but with an almost magical presence that made everyone obey him, even without words. Some whispered that he was more wolf than man, that his blood carried ancient powers no ordinary human could understand. In a quiet village at the edge of the northern woods, a young woman named Lyra lived a simple life. She had dark hair that fell like silk over her shoulders and eyes that seemed to see into the souls of people. Or so the villagers said. Brr. Lyra had always been different. She could sense the spirits that wandered near the forests, feel the lingering magic in old stones, and hear whispers no one else could. Inspiration. Some were afraid of her, others admired her, but Lyra never sought attention. She was content tending to her garden, helping her neighbors, and walking in the forests where the sunlight danced through the tall trees. Yet, Lyra's peaceful life was about to change. The kingdom was preparing for a grand gala, an event held once every 5 years. It was said that kings and queens, nobles, and even magical beings sometimes attended. Rumors of curses, hidden powers, and strange happenings always accompanied the event. This time, however, it felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sharpness that made the villagers whisper about change, about destiny. Lyra had been invited to the gala, not as a noble, but as someone whose sight and wisdom could be useful. For she did not know why. The Alpha King wanted her there. And the thought made her uneasy. She had never met Darien, though tales of him reached every corner of the kingdom. They said his eyes could see the truth in anyone, that his presence made even the bravest men and women shrink in fear. The night of the gala arrived. The castle was breathtaking. Towering spires reached toward the moon, glowing softly in the light of enchanted lanterns. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the faint scent of roses carried from gardens unseen. Lyra entered quietly, her simple dress brushing the marble floor, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. She was not alone. Other guests arrived, all polished and elegant, wearing jewels that caught the light and gowns that swept like water. Among them was Prince Kale, a young man with golden hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. He moved toward Lyra with confidence, offering her a polite bow.
"You must be Lyra," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I've heard stories about your
abilities." Lyra nodded, unsure of how to respond. She had expected coldness from the nobles, not friendly curiosity. Prince Kale's charm was magnetic, and though she felt cautious, a part of her was curious. The two walked together along the marble halls, exchanging small talk until they reached the castle balcony. Outside, the moon hung low, casting silver light over the gardens below. "You can see the magic, can't you?" Kale asked softly, glancing at her. Lyra nodded again. "I can feel it, sometimes more clearly than I feel anything else. It is strange and lonely at times."
Kale smiled gently, as if understanding. Perhaps the strange is what makes you special. For a moment, the world seemed to pause.
The night was quiet except for the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Lyra felt a strange pull toward Kale. Not fear, not attraction exactly, but a connection she could not name. In a moment of curiosity, a spark of innocence, she pressed her lips briefly to his cheek. It was nothing serious, yet the gesture was witnessed by eyes she could not see. Darien stood in the shadows of the grand hall, his presence like a storm waiting to break. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on Lyra and Kale. He had not expected to see her with anyone else, and the sight of the simple fleeting kiss ignited something deep within him. Desperation, jealousy, is a small ember at first. Desperation. But in Darien it roared like wildfire. His fists clenched, and the air around him seemed to grow heavier, charged with power he could barely control. Brrr. The hall's lanterns flickered as if sensing the rising storm in the Alpha King's heart. Lyra noticed movement out of the corner of her eye, a shadow shifting, and felt an uneasy chill. Desperation. She turned, but the figure was gone, or perhaps she only imagined it. Her heart quickened. Brrr. Something about the night felt different. Prince Kael looked at her concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra replied, though her voice trembled slightly. She could not shake the feeling that someone, something, was watching her, with eyes that could pierce through her very soul. The gala continued, but Lyra could no longer enjoy it. Desperation. She wandered through the castle, seeking quiet, walking along corridors lined with portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her. The music faded behind her, replaced by the soft echo of her footsteps and her own anxious heartbeat. In a small hidden chamber, Lyra paused. The room was filled with old scrolls and books that smelled of time and dust. Brrr. She ran her fingers along the spines, feeling the pulse of magic lingering in them. She opened a book at random, and the words glowed faintly in silver. Breath. She could not read them fully, but she understood their warning. When hearts are tested by desire, kingdoms tremble. The shadow of jealousy cannot be contained.
Lyra shivered. The warning was meant for her.
Bert, or perhaps for Darien. Brr. She had heard rumors of his temper, of the mystical power he wielded, and now the prophecy in the book made her fear what she had witnessed, and what had witnessed her. Meanwhile, Darien returned to his private chambers, pacing like a caged wolf. Brr. His thoughts were a whirlwind of anger and longing. He did not know whether to punish the one who had dared to touch another, or to draw her to himself and claim her in the way only he could. His jealousy gnawed at him, turning into a restless, burning need that he could not ignore. The Alpha King's most trusted advisors watched him from a distance, aware that their ruler was on the brink. Brr. They whispered among themselves. "He has never shown such fury," one said. Desperation.
It is more than jealousy. Something is awakening.
Darien's mind was a battlefield. He knew his anger could be dangerous, that it could harm the people of the kingdom. Desperation. Yet he could not quell it. He thought of Lyra, her gentle eyes, the way she moved like the wind through the trees, unaware of the fire she had ignited. He wanted to control that fire, to own it, yet he feared it might consume him instead. Back in her room, Lyra sat by the window, staring at the moonlit gardens below. Desperation. She could not stop thinking about the Alpha King, about the power he held, and about the shadow of jealousy that had passed over the gala. Something told her that her life had changed forever. The kiss, innocent though it was, had awakened a force that could alter the destiny of the kingdom and her own heart. The night deepened. Desperation. A cold wind swept through the castle, carrying with it whispers of future turmoil. The portraits along the halls seemed to flicker with unseen faces. The shadows moved with intent, and Lyra felt as if the walls themselves were breathing, watching, waiting. Outside! In the forest beyond the castle walls, wolves howled in a chorus that made the hair on Lyra's arms stand on end. Breath. She had felt the same call before, in moments when magic stirred violently in the air. It was a warning, and she understood it instinctively. Darien's jealousy was not just an emotion. It was a force, one that could ripple through the kingdom like a storm. As she closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing thoughts, A single phrase echoed in her mind, almost like a voice carried on the wind. The heart of the Alpha is a shadow, and shadows can destroy all that is light. Brr. Lyra did not sleep that night. She stayed by the window until the first light of dawn, wondering how one fleeting kiss could have set so many forces into motion. Brand. She could feel the coming storm, in the air, in the trees, and most of all, in the heart of the man who had watched her so closely. And Darian in his chamber stared at the distant horizon, his mind torn between fury and desire. His jealousy had awakened a part of him that even he feared, a part that could destroy the kingdom if he let it. And yet, he could not turn away from the thought of Lyra. Not now. Not ever. Outside, the castle gardens glimmered under the first rays of the sun. Brrr. Life seemed peaceful, almost serene. But beneath the calm, the seeds of chaos had been planted, watered, by desire and jealousy alike. And so, the kingdom of Lithoria entered a new era, not one of peace, but of shadows, of longing, and of a storm that would not rest until the hearts of its rulers and its people were tested to the very edge. Because the Alpha had watched. And what he felt that night would change everything. The morning after the gala, the kingdom of Lithoria seemed calm, yet the stillness was deceiving. The rivers gleamed with a strange silver sheen, and the trees in the royal gardens whispered as if speaking to one another in a language only the wind could understand.
Magic had begun to stir.
Those who knew the old way sensed a shift in the air, a tension that could not be explained by ordinary means. Lyra walked through the castle halls, her mind heavy with thoughts of the previous night. The fleeting kiss with Prince Kael was innocent, yet she could not shake the image of Darian's dark, stormy eyes watching them from the shadows. There had been something in that look that chilled her, yet drew her in at the same time. She tried to focus on the task at hand, helping the kingdom prepare for the upcoming council meeting where matters of magic, defense, and diplomacy would be discussed. But the Alpha King's shadow was always present. Even in her quiet moments, she felt it, his gaze following her, unseen yet unmistakable. And Darian himself was restless. He strode through the castle like a force of nature, his thoughts a whirlwind of jealousy, desire, and a dangerous need for control. Even the guards, loyal and brave, felt the tension in the air and dared not approach him with questions. Prince Kael, unaware of the true depth of Darian's feelings, sought Lyra's company again. He approached her in the library, a quiet place filled with shelves of ancient books and soft sunlight streaming through high windows.
"Good morning, Lyra," Kael said, his voice warm. "I hope you rested after the gala."
Lyra looked up, her expression careful. "I did. The night was full of surprises."
Kael smiled. "I hope none of them were unpleasant." Lyra shook her head.
"No, just complicated."
He tilted his head. "Complicated? I don't understand."
She hesitated. How could she explain that the complication was not him, but the Alpha King, the man who could crush the kingdom with a thought, whose jealousy was like a living storm?
And yet, she could not avoid it forever. There are forces at work here, Prince Kael. Things you cannot see. Wrath. And even things you can see, they are dangerous. Kael frowned but did not retreat. I will not abandon you. Whatever comes, we face it together. Lyra appreciated his words, but deep in her heart, she knew that facing these forces meant confronting Darian himself. And Darian was not someone who could be reasoned with easily. His jealousy, once stirred, was a storm no one could calm, not even her. That evening, the first signs of the curse appeared. The castle wolves, normally calm and obedient, began to howl without reason. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, reflecting the storm brewing in the Alpha King's heart. The guards reported strange shadows moving in corridors where no one had walked. Candles flickered even without wind. Whispers floated on the air, speaking of betrayal, longing, and forbidden desire. Lyra sensed the danger before anyone else. She wandered into the gardens, hoping the fresh air would calm her thoughts.
But the wind carried a voice, a low, almost imperceptible murmur. Beware.
Breath. The heart of the Alpha burns. Her breath caught. The words were not spoken aloud, yet they were clear. Lyra understood. Darian's jealousy was more than an emotion. It was a force, one that could awaken magic long dormant and shake the kingdom to its core. Meanwhile, Darian's private chambers were a storm of its own. He had locked the doors and paced like a caged wolf. His mind was a battle between control and desire, between the need to dominate and the need to protect. His jealousy for Lyra's attention toward Kale burned inside him, growing hotter with each passing moment. He thought of Lyra's smile, her gentle voice, the way her hair caught the moonlight the previous night. She was not his, and yet she stirred something inside him that no conquest, no victory, no crown could ever give. He wanted her to be safe, yet he could not bear the thought of her touching another's heart. The Alpha King's fury was not silent. His magic, subtle but potent, began to seep into the castle. A black mist swirled in corners of rooms, unseen by most but felt by all. Even the walls seemed to hum with tension, vibrating with energy that Lyra, sensitive as she was, could perceive. The next day, Lyra sought counsel with the castle's oldest seer, a woman named Merith who had lived for centuries and seen kingdoms rise and fall. Merith's eyes were clouded but sharp, and her voice carried the weight of knowledge few could comprehend.
"You have touched the heart of the Alpha child," Merith said, her gaze piercing. "And now his jealousy awakens what should not be awakened."
The kingdom is at risk, for desire and envy are stronger than steel when combined with magic. Lyra's heart pounded. "Can it be stopped?" she asked. The old woman shook her head slowly. "Only if the heart that burns can learn restraint. Different cannot. Darkness will spread. The rivers will blacken. The crops will fail. Even the very stones of the castle may turn against you. You must find a way to calm him, or the kingdom will fall."
Lyra left the seer's hut, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do, but the thought terrified her.
Darian was not a man who listened easily, especially not when emotions controlled him. Yet, she also knew that his jealousy, if left unchecked, could destroy everything she had ever cared for.
That evening she found herself in the throne room, a place usually filled with grandeur and order, now dim and shadowed. Darian stood by the great window, looking out at the forest beyond.
His expression was unreadable, yet the tension in his body told her more than words ever could. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and controlled, though the storm beneath it was visible.
You walked with him last night. Lyra bowed her head slightly. "It was innocent, Your Majesty."
Nothing more. Darian's eyes narrowed. "Innocence can be dangerous," he said, "especially when hearts are involved." She met his gaze, sensing the struggle inside him. "You must not let your feelings control you," she said softly. "The magic of the kingdom, it will respond to your anger." For a moment, the Alpha King said nothing. He turned away, gripping the window ledge so tightly that his knuckles whitened. The wind outside howled, as if echoing the turmoil within him. Finally he spoke, voice barely audible.
Operation. Control is easier said than done. Lyra stepped closer, her heart beating rapidly. Then let me help, she said.
Brr.
I can guide you if you let me, but you must listen. Darian's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, and in that moment Lyra saw the man behind the Alpha, the man who longed, feared, and loved more deeply than anyone could imagine.
Parade. And yet that softness was fleeting, replaced quickly by the storm in his eyes.
Listen, yes, he said finally. But understand this, anyone who touches your heart, anyone,
will face my wrath. Lyra felt a chill, not from fear, but from the weight of his words. She realized then that Darian's jealousy was not simple anger. It was a force that could shape reality itself, a magic born from the depths of his heart. And she understood, with a sudden clarity, that the balance of the kingdom rested on the fragile threads of his control, and on her ability to reach him. As night fell, the first true signs of the curse became impossible to ignore. Shafts. The castle guards reported wolves prowling near the gates, their eyes glowing unnaturally in the darkness. Candles in the corridors went out for no reason, and the air was thick with a restless energy that made breathing feel heavy. Lyra returned to her chambers, exhausted but unable to sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the moonlit gardens, feeling the pulse of magic beneath the stones and in the air. She knew the kingdom's fate and Darian's fate were entwined with her own. And outside, in the shadows beyond the castle, a figure moved silently. Not a wolf, not entirely human, a shadow of magic itself, stirred by the Alpha's jealousy and desire. It paused at the edge of the garden, watching, waiting, as if testing the strength of the hearts it sought to challenge. Lyra shivered. The storm was coming, she realized. And when it struck, nothing would ever be the same. Because the Alpha's jealousy was no longer hidden. It was alive, breathing, a force that could either protect or destroy.
And Lyra, she was at the center of it all. The kingdom of Lithoria trembled under a tension that could be felt even in the quietest corners of the castle.
The winds whispered warnings, and the rivers shivered with the pull of magic that had long slept beneath the stones. Wolves prowled the gardens at night, their eyes glowing with unnatural light, and the castle corridors seemed alive, as if the very walls breathed with anticipation. Lyra moved carefully through the halls. Her steps echoed softly, but each one felt heavier than the last. She had spent days trying to understand the nature of Darian's jealousy and the magic it stirred. Every instinct within her warned that the Alpha King's emotions were no longer contained, and the more he allowed the fire in his heart to burn unchecked, the more dangerous the kingdom became.
Yet she also understood another truth. Darian was not evil.
He was a man caught in a storm of desire and fear, of love so deep it had begun to shape reality itself. That was why the kingdom trembled. That was why the wolves roamed. That was why magic, old and restless, had begun to awaken. Prince Kael approached her in the garden, the early light casting long shadows over the cobblestone paths. He looked troubled.
You should not face him alone, Kael said softly, his gaze sweeping toward the castle. The Alpha, he is not the man the stories say.
He is more dangerous than anyone could imagine.
I know, she said quietly, but he is also brave, not beyond saving.
If I do nothing, the kingdom suffers.
And worse, he suffers. His jealousy is not just anger, it is a curse waiting to break free. I cannot ignore it. Kael's expression softened.
then you are braver than any of us. But be careful, Lyra.
Brr.
You are walking on the edge of a storm, and storms do not forgive.
Lyra offered a small smile, though her heart trembled.
I will be careful.
Bird.
I must be.
That evening she found herself standing before Darian in the great hall. Berration. He was leaning against the throne, his presence commanding the room even in silence. The storm of his emotions was palpable. Breath. Lyra felt it pressing against her chest, making each breath a struggle. "You have come," Darian said, his voice low, rough with tension.
"Do you not fear what my jealousy can do?"
Lyra met his gaze steadily.
"I fear it," she admitted. "But I fear more what happens if it is left unchecked. The kingdom suffers because of it, and you suffer too."
Berration.
Darian's eyes darkened. "You speak boldly."
"Most would tremble, yet you," his voice faltered, then regained strength.
"You understand nothing of the power within me."
Berration. One wrong move, one careless thought, and everything you care about could vanish. Berration.
Lyra took a cautious step closer. "Then let me help you control it," she said softly.
I do not want to see the kingdom destroyed. I do not want to see you hurt. Brr. But you must listen to me. Not as an alpha, but as a man. For the first time, Darian's expression softened, and Lyra saw the man beneath the mask of power, a man haunted, longing, and lost in a storm he could not escape. Brr. Yet even as the moment lingered, the shadow of his jealousy remained, a reminder that his heart was still chained by fear and desire. The next day, the consequences of his unchecked jealousy began to show. Berration. Reports came from the northern villages. Crops withered overnight, rivers blackened for hours, and wolves attacked not out of hunger, but as if guided by unseen forces. The court grew restless. Brr. The nobles whispered of curses, of dark magic awakening in the castle, and of the Alpha's dangerous obsession with one woman. Lyra sought counsel once more from Merith, the ancient seer. Berration.
"The fire grows," Merith said gravely, her eyes clouded yet piercing. "His jealousy is no longer merely emotion."
Brr. It is a force that shapes the kingdom. It binds the hearts of men and women alike. Berration. If left unchecked, it will consume everything.
You must guide him.
Or the land itself will suffer. Lyra felt the weight of destiny pressing on her shoulders. Brr. She knew that the only way to calm Darian's jealousy was to reach his heart, to help him release the chains that bound it. But doing so required courage she was not sure she possessed. That night, she found Darian in the moonlit gardens, standing among the statues of ancient kings and queens. His figure was tall, imposing, yet his posture betrayed a tension he could not hide. Berration.
"You are here again," he said, not turning to face her. "Do you not fear what you are meddling with?"
Lyra stepped forward.
I fear it, she said quietly, but I cannot stand by while the kingdom suffers.
Berration.
"And I cannot stand by while you suffer."
I want to help you.
Brr.
If you let me. Darian remained silent, his fists clenched.
Berration. Then, in a sudden motion, he turned to face her. His eyes were wild, dark with the storm inside him. "Do you think you can help me?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and longing.
"You do not understand what this feeling is."
Berration. It is not merely jealousy. It is desire, fear, love, and rage, all bound together. Bray. It is a force that could destroy anyone who touches it, even you. Brasp. Lyra met his gaze steadily, unafraid. Then let me face it with you, she said.
We can face it together. But you must let me in. You must trust me, if only for a moment. For a long time, Darien said nothing.
Inspiration. The wind whispered through the gardens, rustling leaves and carrying distant howls. Then, slowly, he lowered his fists, though his eyes never left hers.
Ah, you are brave, he said finally. Perhaps too brave for your own good. Lyra stepped closer.
Bravery is not enough, she said softly. We need understanding. Brask. And you need to let go of the fear that your heart will destroy everything. Darien's expression softened, yet the storm in his heart was not gone. Inspiration. He looked at her, and for a fleeting moment she saw the vulnerability he rarely showed. Then, abruptly, the moment shattered. Brr. A howl echoed through the gardens, louder, fiercer than before. The wolves were moving as if drawn by the tension in Darien's heart. He stepped back, his control faltering, and the black mist of magic swirled around him, coiling like a living thing. Lyra gasped. The magic was no longer subtle. It was alive, dangerous, and feeding on Darien's jealousy. She knew that if he did not regain control, the curse could spread beyond the castle walls, beyond the kingdom itself. Darien! She shouted, stepping forward despite the growing storm. Listen to me! Inspiration. Focus on me, on us. For a moment, his eyes met hers. Bray. The storm inside him wavered, and the black mist pulsed, responding to her voice, her presence. Lyra reached out, placing a hand over his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. Inspiration. You are not alone, she said, her voice firm but gentle. Your heart is not a weapon.
You can choose, control, love, without destroying.
Darien's breath came in ragged gasps. The mist swirled faster and the wolves howled louder, but Lyra held her ground. Inspiration. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the storm inside him began to settle. His fists unclenched and the black mist thinned, retreating as if obeying her calm. Inspiration. Finally, Darien sank to his knees, exhausted, his head bowed. Lyra knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder.
You did it, she whispered. You controlled it.
Inspiration. You chose love instead of rage. For the first time in days, Darien looked at her without the storm in his eyes. There was still power there, still intensity, but it was tempered by trust, by understanding, by the bond they had forged in the heart of chaos.
But the kingdom itself bore the scars of his jealousy.
Windows were cracked, trees uprooted, and the rivers carried a strange black sheen. Lyra knew this was only the beginning. Inspiration. The curse had not been destroyed, only contained for now. And yet, there was hope. For the first time, she believed that the Alpha King could love without destroying, that he could be the ruler the kingdom needed, and the man she had come to care for. As dawn broke, casting golden light over the castle, Lyra and Darien stood together on the balcony. Inspiration. The wind carried the scent of rain and earth, and the distant howls of wolves had faded into a quiet murmur.
You are remarkable, Darien said quietly.
You saved not just the kingdom, but me.
Lyra smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of his words.
We saved each other, she said.
Yet even in this moment of fragile peace, a shadow stirred beyond the castle walls. Magic older than the kingdom itself watched, waiting. Inspiration. It had felt the Alpha's jealousy, the surge of desire and restraint, and it was patient. It would test them again. Because in Lithoria no bond was ever simple, and no heart, even that of an Alpha, was free from the chains of desire, power, and destiny.
The kingdom of Lithoria awoke under a sky streaked with gray.
The sun rose slowly, struggling to pierce the mist that clung to the mountains and forests. For days the winds had carried whispers of unease, and now the entire land seemed to hold its breath. The blackened rivers were slowly clearing, and the trees, though scarred, had begun to stand tall again. Yet the shadows lingered, as if the kingdom remembered the storm that had passed and feared the one that might come. Lyra stood on the balcony of the castle, watching the forests beyond. The events of the past days weighed heavily on her heart. She had faced Darian's jealousy, confronted magic born of desire, and seen the raw power that one man's emotions could unleash on the world. And yet, despite the dangers, she had also seen the Alpha King's heart, not the fearsome ruler, but the man beneath the mask. He had touched his pain, his longing, and his love. But calm was fleeting. Even as the morning light spilled over the gardens, Lyra sensed a new stir in the air, a shift in the magic that surrounded the castle. The shadows moved differently now, alive with intent, and the wolves in the forest howled in patterns that spoke of foreboding. Something was coming, something stronger than anything they had faced before. Inside the castle, Darian moved like a coiled spring. He had spent the night in restless thought, wandering the corridors, sensing the kingdom through the pulse of his own power. His jealousy had been tempered by Lyra's courage and guidance, but he knew it was fragile. Any misstep, any doubt, and the storm could return with even greater fury. Lyra entered the chamber where he waited, her heart steadied despite the fear she felt. The shadows are moving, she said quietly. Something is testing us. Darian's eyes, dark and intense, met hers.
I can feel it, he replied. The magic in has grown stronger.
It seeks to challenge me, to challenge us, but I will not fail.
You must not face it alone, Lyra said, placing a hand on his arm. Whatever comes, we face it together. Darian's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment the storm within him quieted.
He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. Together, he whispered. That evening, the first signs of the new danger became clear. From the depths of the forest came a cold wind, carrying shadows that moved like living fingers, twisting and reaching for the castle. The wolves, once merely restless, now ran in tight packs, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Magic thrummed in the air, responding to Darian's emotions and the growing threat that loomed just beyond the castle walls. Lyra and Darian stood together on the balcony, watching the encroaching darkness. It is testing your control, she said. If it senses fear, it will strike harder. Darian clenched his fists, summoning the strength he had learned to temper. Then I will show it strength, not fear. I will protect this kingdom. And you. The first wave of the attack came as night fell. Shadows poured into the castle grounds, writhing like black water. The wolves howled and surged against the gates, but Darian, standing tall, raised his hand. The air crackled with his power, and the shadows recoiled, hissing as if burned by his presence. Lyra, close at his side, felt the magic swirl around them. She knew this was a battle not just of strength, but of hearts. Darian's jealousy had once fed this darkness, but now, tempered with love and trust, it could protect instead of destroy. The shadows pressed closer, and Darian's control wavered for a moment. Lyra grasped his arm firmly. Focus on us, she urged. Focus on our bond, on what we've built together. that is stronger than fear, stronger than jealousy. Darien took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He felt her presence, steady and calm, and the storm inside him began to settle. The shadows, sensing the shift, hissed and recoiled, retreating into the mist. But this was only the first wave. Lyra knew the heart of the danger still waited, stronger and more cunning than before. The next morning the council gathered in the great hall. Nobles, advisors, and soldiers waited with tense expressions, sensing the same unease that Lyra and Darien felt. Reports came from the northern villages. Wolves had disappeared mysteriously, crops were beginning to grow again, and the rivers ran clear, but signs of disturbance remained. Darien addressed the council, his voice firm and commanding, yet tempered with the wisdom he had gained. "The kingdom is safe for now," he said, "but the forces we face are ancient and patient." They test us because they know our hearts are our greatest power and our greatest weakness. We must remain vigilant. Lyra stood nearby, feeling the weight of his words. She understood the truth. Love and trust had saved the kingdom once, but the trials were not over. Darien's control was not perfect, and the shadows would seek another opportunity. As the day passed, Lyra and Darien trained together in the gardens, their movements synchronized, their energy blending. The wolves watched from the edges, silent and alert. Magic swirled subtly around them, responding to their bond, growing stronger as their connection deepened. "You have changed," Lyra said softly, pausing in her practice. "You are no longer consumed by jealousy." Darien's eyes met hers. "I am stronger now," he said, "because I am not alone." "Because you are here." The words were simple, but they carried weight heavier than any crown or sword. Lyra felt her heart lift, yet she also sensed the lingering threat, the shadow waiting for any sign of weakness. Night fell again, and the final test came. The shadows surged a second time, stronger, faster, more deliberate. They seemed to know where to strike, aiming for the weakest points in the castle's defenses. Wolves snarled, hissing and leaping, but this time they were not alone. Darien stood at the center of the courtyard, Lyra at his side, their hands clasped together. "Together," he whispered. Overhead, the shadows attacked, twisting and swirling like living smoke. Darien raised his hand, summoning a force that shone with silver light. The magic of his jealousy, once dangerous and uncontrolled, now flowed through him like a protective river. Lyra added her presence, her calm and her understanding feeding the power. Together, their bond became a shield, repelling the shadows, breaking their momentum. The battle lasted through the night. Exhaustion pressed on them, but they did not waver. Darien's power surged, controlled by love and trust instead of jealousy. Lyra guided him, whispering words of encouragement, reminding him of their bond, of the hope they carried. Finally, as the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains, the shadows faltered. With a final pulse of magic, Darien and Lyra expelled them from the castle grounds. The mist lifted, the wolves calmed, and the kingdom breathed a collective sigh of relief. Darien sank to his knees, exhausted, but he smiled at Lyra, a genuine, unguarded smile. "We did it," he said, together. Lyra knelt beside him, placing her hand on his.
"Yes," she whispered.
Together. The kingdom began to heal. Windows were repaired, gardens restored, and rivers cleared. The nobles and people looked to their Alpha King not only as a ruler, but as a symbol of restraint, courage, and redemption. Darien's transformation, from a man consumed by jealousy to one guided by love, was a story that spread across Lithoria, giving hope to all. her. Yet even in this moment of triumph, Lyra sensed that life in Lithoria would always hold challenges. Magic was alive, hearts were complex, and desire could stir storms at any time. But now she knew they could face them together. Darian rose, standing tall beside her. He looked at the kingdom he had fought to protect, then back at Lyra.
"The world is not perfect," he said quietly.
But when we face it together, it can be better. Lyra smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Together. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the castle, the shadows retreated, but their presence lingered as a reminder. The kingdom had been tested, hearts had been challenged, but both knew that vigilance, trust, and courage would always be required. The Alpha King and the woman who had tamed his storm stood on the balcony, watching their kingdom awaken. Wolves howled in the distance, but their voices were no longer threatening. They were part of the harmony of a land renewed. For Darian, jealousy had once been a curse, a dangerous force that could have destroyed everything he held dear. Now it had been transformed into strength, tempered by love and understanding. For Lyra, courage and empathy had guided them both through the storm, proving that one heart could reach another even across the chasms of fear and desire. And in the quiet of the morning, as light spilled over the castle towers, a single truth became clear. The kingdom of Lithoria had survived because two hearts had chosen to face the storm together, and in that choice both had found redemption.